we were somewhere in southern Germany or Switzerland at this house, and they're like, actually, we're gonna go. My husband's working up in the mountains, right, with the sheep, and so we need to go visit him. And so part of this time with them was following them in our rental car. And then we had to hike a ways. And this is like in the mountains. It's June, but it's like sleeting and snowing. And then we get to all the animals and to this little hut that he stays in up with the animals, and they hosted, we had fondue and, of course, fresh cheese from all the animals. And I just remember thinking, like, this is something I don't think my parents could have even like planned for or paid for, right? Especially back in the day.
Welcome to the Where Have You Been podcast. I'm your host, Bill Ream, and each week on the pod, I have conversations with incredible guests from all walks of life. Expect to hear funny, crazy, emotional, life-changing, and even sometimes life-threatening stories and experiences that will entertain and inspire you. As always, I appreciate your likes, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews wherever you are listening. It doesn't sound like much, but it truly helps the pod get to the ears of more people who may enjoy it. And check out the website, whybpodcast.com, for links to the socials where you can find pictures from the guests and their stories, and also buy merch if you're so inclined. Now let's get to this week's episode. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back into another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Bill Ream, with you every single week. And of course, I have, as always, another incredible guest on the show today. I'm very, very, very excited to have a certified financial educator and fellow podcaster. I have Suzy May on the show today. Suzy, welcome. And if you would be so kind as to let our listeners know, who are you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Suzy, and currently I'm living in Sevilla, Spain. Our family slow travels is how I like to describe it. We spend half the year in Spain, half the year in Colorado, but actually this upcoming half of the year will be in Japan. So we are going to a new to all of us country. I live with my husband and my two children, age 6 and 9.
And before we get into more about who you are, what you do, what have you been to Japan?
No, this will be first for all of us, especially my kids, but also first for my husband too.
So exciting.
Yep.
Well, before we get into like the why behind that and whatnot, so tell us more about what you do, if you would.
Absolutely. I do online. Well, I'll tell you first about the podcast. I've been hosting Wander World School. It's a podcast to help families plan and fund long-term and slow travel. Been hosting that for over a year. I've met some amazing families doing full-time travels or slow travels or taking gap years, as well as a lot of world school creators and leaders. And world schooling is a very broad term for basically taking learning on the road. I believe you can do it at home with a global mindset, but also it is really fun to travel and to learn as we go, especially as a family. To see the world through our kids' eyes is amazing. Things that I've seen before a million times, and then they're in awe. It's the greatest thing about being able to travel with kids is seeing their eyes light up when they get to do something really cool, or we get to experience somewhere new together. So that has been really fun to host that. And then I also do one-on-one coaching with families that want to financially and logistically prepare for long-term or slow travel.
That's so excellent. And yeah, it's like, not only are you giving your kids I'm sure they're getting formal education as well, but traveling is so much of its own form of education in and of itself that it's just like, and I think it also kind of, you tell me because you're the expert, but I feel like it also kind of opens their minds to wanting to learn more, not even just about travel and culture, but just it makes them want to just learn, I guess.
Absolutely. And yes, they do go to a trilingual school when we are in Spain. That was a big reason for us moving over here for a school year 3 years ago. And then we've been able to keep it up part-time. We still have some commitments outside of Spain. But part of the big reason was to have that language exposure at early ages. My husband's from Germany, so they've been getting German, but not in any academic sense. And then we also know Spanish is a very important language in the world. There's many countries that speak Spanish, and it's very useful in the United States. So it's very important for us that they also have Spanish exposure early on. And that was an adventure, just dropping them off at a school in Spain. Like we did this about almost 3 years ago. I was like, "Oh no, they don't speak Spanish. What are we doing?" But the cool thing is kids are pretty adaptable. They can pick
Hmm.
up languages pretty easily. And now my son, he was so excited because he got a really high score on his Spanish like quiz. And I think that's pretty impressive that you came here 3 years ago not speaking anything, and then now you're able to even take a little language quiz in the language. And I've been learning Spanish as well. My husband had some Spanish background, but was adding to it while we live here. It's just so much easier to even be motivated to learn a language when you are immersed in it. So that's been a big reason for spending as much time as possible here for us and our family. And, we'll just keep it going as long as it works.
And I want to ask you this because, and I kind of have a little pathway that I go down when we get to the introduction part, but I'm going to steer away from that just a
Okay.
bit because I'm genuinely curious. So I assume, like, when you go, you chose Sevilla, Spain and I would like to know why, but I'll ask you that in a bit. But in order for you to, I guess, like, okay, so here I am at home in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm more of a homebody than I probably wish I was or that I should be. So, really, if you were that type of person, then learning the language doesn't even matter, right? So, I assume that you and your family, you don't just sit at home. You get out there and you do things and you're in the community.
That is a really good observation, is that yes, if we only wanted to be in our house speaking to each other, it would be very easy to not get that much Spanish. This is one reason why school has been so important. I did language classes early on. There's so much school support, the kids, the activities, things that we need to do with them. So actually, kids is a great motivator to get out of the house. I joke that I actually hate to leave the house, but I love to leave the country.
That's
And
fair.
that sticks with me sometimes. I'm like, "Oh, I gotta leave the house," and then I'm like, "Oh, but we should plan a trip to this country." So, sometimes, yes, being a homebody, and this is one reason we like to slow travel, is we have an apartment here. It's so nice to have bikes and stuff for the kids and really know our way around. We just rode the buses all day today doing different things. It's so convenient and easy, but yeah, it is new because sometimes there are things I don't understand in the language because Sevillano, the language, the dialect here in Sevilla in Andalusia is quite strong, you could say. So sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what they're saying. But then I also am like, maybe it's because I don't fully speak Spanish yet, or because of the dialect. Maybe I'm just trying to blame the dialect and really it's me. But I mean, there are definitely new encounters that we have every day and new places to explore. The beach is an hour away. There's so much to see in Spain. So it's been nice to have some comforts when we are here, but also have so much in our backyard, you could say, or so much nearby. We went to Italy last month. That was a 2-hour flight. That's just not the same from Colorado. So we've been
Right.
taking advantage of the proximity to some really cool locations while we're here.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And I just kind of am putting myself in your shoes. Like, what would I feel like, as you said, like when I go to travel somewhere, like I'm not staying in the hotel or the Airbnb or the whatever. I'm out there all day long from break of dawn until late at night trying to see as much as I can see. Yet I live in a place that I've barely explored. It's just mind boggling to me that yeah, 30 minutes away from me in many directions, there's some really cool stuff to see, and I haven't done it. Like, I think maybe we should do that as human beings. Like, take a minute, sit back, pretend like we're visiting. And, if you're looking for something to do on a weekend, maybe that's a great idea. I don't know.
No, it's very true. And I talk about this with families because there are families that are saying, I want to travel more. How can I financially do this? What does this look like? And I realize it's absolutely a privilege to be able to have this level of flexibility. We're lucky with remote work. We rent our house out in Colorado, which is sometimes a lot of work. We do different things to make this possible. And also, it's still something that we're very grateful for. And not everyone has that available to them right now. And so it's a combination of let's plan and prepare for that trip that you desire to take while also knowing that in your backyard, I bet there's really cool cultural fests that you can still take part in. Going to restaurants from, oh, I love Thai food. Like, give me Korean, pho anytime. You can still have some of these cultural global experiences right in your backyard. And also the nature in a lot of parts of the US is unmatched. There's a lot of amenities. I mean, there's pros and cons to enjoying where you're planted in your home base or whatnot. And then also I have a sense of wanderlust. I do like to travel. There's definitely things within the vicinity of Colorado that I have not seen that people love to do. And yet I've been to Morocco twice and lots of different things. So I always feel like I'll get to those places at some point when I have less energy for some of these bigger trips and bigger travel because there's seasons to life. And I'm sure, as we're getting a little older, we start to realize that my energy levels for certain types of things are just not the same as they were in my 20s, or as a family, it's different. The needs and the ages and the stages of your kids might dictate different ways that you travel. And so I also know watching my parents, like their idea of a good time with traveling in their 70s and 80s is very different than the people that think, oh, I'm just going to retire in the future and have all this energy to travel. That might not always be the case. So it's important to recognize the seasons of life, take advantage of the opportunities you have when you have this energy, when you have this desire to, but also know that at some point it's probably going to shift. And maybe I will have a chance to take advantage of all the things in my backyard that are a lot closer at some point. Just haven't got to some of them yet.
Yeah. Well, that's a very fair point. Makes me feel a little bit less guilty about
Absolutely.
not having
Someday.
seen so much now. Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much to see even outside of our backyards, outside of our home bases. There is so much to see in this world. I have accepted this level of, I don't really have FOMO, to be honest. There's actually a lot of places in the world that I think, 20 years ago, I would have said, oh, I want to go there. I want to go there. Even if I didn't know anything about it, I just have this desire. And now I'm like, I think it's okay that there's actually a lot of parts of this world that I probably never see. And that's okay for a lot of reasons. I don't need to make my way over there unless, something shifts or changes. There are still a lot of places that I do want to get to for various reasons, but it's okay to know that we're not going to get to everywhere. And that's just how it is. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of that is appreciating what you actually have experienced and not taking any of those moments for granted. And there's also going to be, I'm foreshadowing a bit, but when we get near the end of the episode, there's a question I'm going to ask you. And I always make sure that I tell my guests, like, well, I'm not talking bucket list because bucket lists can be massive. And I have a huge bucket list and it's expanded since I started doing this podcast. But I have a
when you talk
select
to
few
people.
places. Yeah, absolutely. But I have a select few places that like I would be really upset with myself if I was on my deathbed and I never got a chance to get to. So yeah, I get it 1,000%. Before we go any further, I want to make sure I don't forget. I always ask up front because I know some people don't make it to the end of the episodes for one reason or another. Would you mind telling people where they can find your podcast and if you have like a website and stuff? Well, I know you do, but if you would share any socials and stuff with the listeners.
Yes, absolutely. It's the Wander World School podcast on all the podcast streaming players. That is also the website for the podcast, Wander World School altogether.com. And then I'm on the social media sites, Instagram and such, at SuzyMay.wander. Also, the website, SuzyMayWander.com. And that'll find me. All those different things. But come check out the podcast. Or if you know of a family that wants to travel more or has traveled some or wants to be inspired, or also I do an episode periodic, like at the end of every month, I do an episode with practical tips on more ways to financially and logistically fit more travel into your life. So I think a lot of that can apply to people that don't travel with a family right now or at all, is because there's still things like home exchange that are really, really cool opportunity to save on travel costs, have more authentic travel experience, and just like some really cool opportunities that are available. And a lot of that stuff is applicable to anyone, regardless of family status. So
Yeah,
come
absolutely.
join me.
Yeah. And of course, I'll have everything in the show notes as well. But again, some people don't check those either. So hopefully it'll stick in people's minds as they're
Yes.
driving or
World School.
jogging or doing whatever they're doing today while they're listening to us. So very cool. And I hope everyone checks all of that stuff out. And, we're not competing with podcasting. It's one big, huge family, I think. And it's
Absolutely.
just dropping stuff all over. But, there's room for more. So
Absolutely.
add to your playlist. So let me ask you, Suzy, when did travel become a thing in your life? Was it something that you grew up with in your family, or did that start later on for you? And how did it really become like, I have to do this?
I'm very lucky. My mom studied abroad in her college, in college to Germany. And this was when she took a boat over to Germany from the US. She grew up in New York. And then she had this year-long study abroad experience and then kept in contact with a lot of the families over there. So for various reasons, when I was 1, we went to Germany and visited some of the family there. Obviously, I don't remember that trip. And then later we went for a month in middle school. We stayed with family friends, which is what made it possible for my family to be able to travel. They were both librarians, so it wasn't like they yeah, they didn't have money growing on trees for librarians. But we were able to make it work in just finding creative ways to travel. And then I would say that is when it really started. I was like, wait, this is really cool to have some family friends in Germany. And then I was able to live in Germany for 2 years for work in my mid-20s. I kept in touch with some of the family friends who were like my mom's friends, had kids that are now my age. So that's cool. And now they have kids who are my kids' age, and we saw them 2 years ago. So that's been a really cool way to keep connections with some of the family friends that my mom made well over 50 years ago in Germany. And I'd say that was one of the main reasons that I really thought traveling is a cool opportunity to see the world and just have these cool experiences that I really, really appreciated. But I'd say living abroad and just having the proximity when I was in Germany, the train could take me to Paris in 2 hours. It was amazing to be able to have that opportunity to travel and see new things. So then after I quit that job, a friend and I did some solo travel for about 10 months and went to all those Southeast Asia countries that are really fun and really cheap. And I think I did that for like a couple $100 a month. When you're traveling really cheaply around Thailand and places, it can be very affordable. That was a really cool opportunity to travel. So it kind of just kept going from there as I found really cool opportunities. I would work for a while, save up, and then travel for a bit, and then go to grad school and work and get a little burned out and then travel for a bit. And so we've been able to fit in quite a bit of travel in that way by sometimes taking longer times off, sometimes being able to live and work in a different country, which is certainly a way to like kind of do what we're doing here now. So there's been quite a bit of travel opportunities in my background that I've really appreciated being able to take advantage of.
That's fantastic. So you kind of knew relatively early on that you wanted to see the world, I guess.
I would
I
yeah.
unfortunately didn't have that in my life. So I got started much later in life. I think that in a way it's probably very cool. And in a way, for me, maybe it's even better that I didn't have it so early on because I think my life would be very much different than it is today. And I think I'm happy where I am at. So,
Yeah, I
but
think that's a good way to
yeah,
think about it. Yeah. You're
yeah.
right. You never know what it's gonna shift, and I'm not gonna say that travel solves all the questions we have or is the ticket to, the happiness in life or anything like that. So I think there's still lots of things about travel that aren't always smooth and do not always have the best outcomes per se. But I will say one of the other trips that really I took a school trip. I really wanted to take a school trip. Went to London, Paris, and Rome. And I remember I like babysat extra to help pay a portion of that. And then after that, I wanted to do a swim trip. And I remember doing private swim lessons to save up as much as I could to contribute to that trip. And that was to Australia and New Zealand when I was 17. And that trip was very pivotal. I remember getting to Auckland, New Zealand, and having to find an internet cafe and dial up and send an email to my parents that I arrived in New Zealand with this organization. We did swimming competitions against other people or from different swim clubs in New Zealand. And it was their winter, our summer. So we were swimming outside under these like heating lamps. I was like, wait, why did I come at this time of year? And I also remember we left July 3rd from the US and landed in New Zealand July 5th because of the time zone changes. So I was like, I didn't have a 4th of July that year.
Oh, that's so
So
funny. Yeah.
yeah, so those trips really did that trip especially gave me a lot of sense of independence because I was with others. Students and teachers were responsible for us, but it was like we were just on our own, just hanging out and doing fun stuff around. I mean, there's a bunch of swimmers, so we're like athletic and dorky. We didn't get in any trouble or anything. But I think it's like every trip just made me want to see what else is out there And that's why it's actually a good thing to sometimes get to this point of, you know what, I'm not going to see everything, because I think it could go two ways. You could either say, oh, now I have to go to every country. Like I'm working my way up towards that. But I'm like, you know what? It's okay. I'm not going to get to everything because I just don't think it's possible to. And it's been fun to see what works, see what we like to do. Sometimes go back and do things that we really enjoyed. Like there's no harm in repeating activities and trips that you enjoy doing, as well as, of course, there's always something new that is enticing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the part where I'm going to ask you, and I tell every guest you can take this any way you'd like to, but let's just jump in since we're already talking travel and travel stories as it is. Suzy, where have you been?
I've touched on a few locations, so maybe we could start with Germany, because that was, like I said, really pivotal in my early childhood, having the family friends that we saw in Germany. I will also say that I tried to learn German in high school, partly because of that. It took 3 years and walked away.
You.
Probably, I could say like, hello. Because then a couple years later, I moved to Germany. I was still taking night classes while I was there. And I was the one who could like talk to the taxi driver and give him directions. You know, if I had a beer or two, then I thought I was fluent, but was probably not. And it's a very hard language. But it was one thing that I really enjoyed living there. And then when I moved back to Colorado, I was in full-time grad school, full-time working. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make friends or meet people here. So then I tried the online dating thing. And that's where I ended up falling. Like I searched, oh, who speaks German in Colorado? And there was like 4 of them. And I was like, oh, he's cute. And now he's my husband.
In all of Colorado.
Yeah.
Floor guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it was not very plentiful. But now it's a really big part of our family still, because my husband speaks German to the kids. His family, we visit them in Germany. We were there for a wedding last year. I've really gotten to know a lot about German people and culture. And yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful country. I will say the weather is not always amazing. It's one reason my husband's like, yeah, we're never going to live in Germany again, because we were in 2 summers, last summer and the summer before, parts of Germany, sometimes in the north, which is notorious for terrible weather. And yeah, it was July and we were in rain jackets and pants and cold and couldn't go to the beach, which like you just want to do if it's July and you're at the beach. So he said, we're only going to go to Germany when it's nice weather. But I think there's so much history in Germany. I went to Berlin when I first moved to Germany. Obviously, it's like before I even knew my husband, but in my 20s, Berlin was the one place I really wanted to go to. And I finally made it happen. I went with like a friend. We went for 4 days and we just did everything. And the history there, just it's phenomenal. I mean, if you've ever studied anything around World War I and World War II, and then the history of Germany after that, and West Germany and East Germany, and it just seems so different from the Germany that I see today, where it's people. The other thing we went to is the 2006 World Cup in Germany. And that was when Germany they were hosting the World Cup, which is, as we know, it's coming up this summer. It's the largest international, football or soccer competition. And Germany was hosting. And my mom was lucky enough to get some lottery tickets and we were able to stay with the family friends. It was an amazing opportunity. And it was one of the first times since like all the history, like since World War II, that Germans like were finally like, you know what, enough time has passed. We can be proud to be German. There were actually flags in the streets and out the windows and stuff. And there hadn't been before that, just because there were years where Germans were understanding that, we people from our country, if it's not we, did some terrible things. Of course, the history is still there and we can't forget about it. And going to some of the concentration camps over the years has been very somber, very heart-wrenching. But also that's stuff that has happened and we really need to understand maybe why, and just we can't forget history. Otherwise, like the famous quote, it's bound to repeat itself. Germany in that sense has been through a lot in the last, 100 some years. And I know from talking with my husband's family and different people over there, it's not always perfect. There's a lot of course, issues anywhere. That's one thing I've learned about moving to Spain is wherever you are, your problems are with you there too. I guess that's the saying, right? Wherever you are, there you are. You can't really run away from your problems. And every place has some sensation of, oh, the grass is greener over there. But I think part of the reason a lot of countries seem amazing is just because we haven't been there long enough to really get to understand some of the bureaucracy or some of the things that people complain about. And I'll say overall, like, life in Spain is very, people seem to be very happy with the, people around the plazas. Like, things are overall really well. But there's election tomorrow here in Andalusia, and I was reading about it, and there's people that are complaining about this issue and that issue, and so you realize these things persist in lots of different locations and places. And kind of cool thing about traveling is you can show up and see the best parts of these locations without always needing to dive really deep into that. But one reason I like to slow travel is actually spending more time in a location does allow you to just understand more of the nuances of that location, more of the complexity, more of the just that it's such a diverse experience for different people. Some people are going to love things, some people aren't. But I think overall, Germany does some great things. Public transit is amazing. When you do have a perfect weather day and you can bike along and it's green, it's a beautiful country. You have mountains, you have beach, and again, really nice people once you get to know them. The language is rough, but a lot of people speak English there. I just read it's the fourth country in Europe with like the highest English rate, like throughout the whole country. Like, there's a lot of English spoken. Of course, rural areas, older generations may not as much, but whenever we're there, I'm just shocked at these. Like, a 10-year-old was trying to translate for us because she heard me speaking English to my son, but I wanted him to listen to the German instructions for this activity that they were doing because he does speak that. And she was so kind to step in and try to translate. And she's like the same age as him. It's amazing what they value in terms of education and how important language exposure is. So that's all stuff that I've really taken away as really important. So those are just some random thoughts all over about Germany, which I'm sure is a country that other people have been to because it is a popular travel destination. But I will not say, it doesn't seem like it's the most popular in Europe. People always talk about Spain or France or Italy to vacation in. And I think that partly goes down to the weather. There can be months where it's just gray and dreary. And having lived there for 2 years, I can say that. It was fine pre-kids because I just bundle up. But with kids, when you got to bundle them up and then they complain after 2 minutes, that's one reason we picked Spain, I'll tell you, because you mentioned that earlier. Why did we pick Sevilla? And part of it was definitely language. But part of it was also the weather and being able to be outside a lot more than we can in Germany is one reason that we're like, let's learn German in Spain.
There you go. One thing I want to go back to real quick, because you mentioned this, and I just was sort of kind of trying to put myself there. When you said when you went for the World Cup in Germany in 2006, was it?
Yes.
And that was sort of when they were just kind of really starting to feel their pride in being German again. Could you feel that, besides seeing the flags everywhere and whatever? Like, could you like really feel that from your time there, that they were really embracing the fact that they were German for the first time in so long? Because I can only imagine. Like, we're proud to be Americans pretty much all the time, and so even though we've done some bad things, but maybe not to the same degree or level as what's happened in the past. I think Germany, but like, that's a really cool moment in time to experience that. I just wondered, like, maybe if you can expand a little more on what that was like for you.
Absolutely. And a lot of what I feel like, I felt this pride. I felt we were in this small town and there were tractors and they were, honking their horns and flags were flying and people were out and about. And I mean, obviously it's a World Cup. It's a football, soccer loving country. But my mom especially was the one who had been there in the 1969-70 and then had visited periodically over the years. And then here I am with her in 2006. We had also gone there as a family in 2001 and stayed with family. But I did see that progression over those years of us going there. And especially my mom felt it. She's like, I don't know if I've ever seen people waving flags around. I'm just proud to represent Germany at the World Cup and to host it, because that's a big deal. You are putting on this international showcase of the biggest sport in the world. And it's a big deal. Countries come from all over. It was a huge industry. And it was cool that my mom got these lottery tickets because it was really just my mom, my brother, and I. So she had 4 tickets, but in every game, every location, we could take one of our like family friends with us. So they were so happy. They're like, sure, you can stay here because you're letting me go to the World Cup, because she got tickets through the lottery, but a lot of the German family members and friends of ours didn't. So I don't know how all that works out, the lottery, if they prioritize people coming from out of the country because they know that they're going to come spend more money while they're in Germany. I don't know. But it worked out quite well in our favor. But it was really poignant to hear from my mom and then her generation of Germans who were just somewhat like happy to see this transition, knowing that it's time and the next generation doesn't need to carry as much of this burden. But also, I think there can be mixed feelings like, are we moving on without recognizing the atrocities? I think there's some people who feel that way. And then, the younger generation says, no, it's time. And maybe the happy medium of all that is that we can be proud of our country and hosting this International World Cup festivities. We can be proud of that. And that doesn't mean that we're completely ignoring the history, right? I think 2 things can be true at one time. And I felt that. But I think it was really cool to see that progression. And I'll say, like, we've been back to Germany. It's like, I don't see flags flying or anything any other time. So it was definitely kind of unique to see that.
That's very cool. Yeah, very cool. So you started to touch on Sevilla, and I guess my question not necessarily would be like why Spain, because I've obviously there's a lot to love about Spain, but and I've never been, by the way, but I've talked to enough people that have, and always heard really wonderful things. But why Sevilla? It's a place I'd never heard of until you mentioned it. I had a guest that said they wanted to go there, and
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd ever heard of that city, town, whatever it is. And so, what about that? Where is it located?
Yes, I told you I was listening to that episode today. And you noted after that like, wait, Sevilla doesn't seem to be like the number one. I will say it is quite a touristy place once you do land in Spain. I think it is on a few people's Spain visit list just because it does have the cathedral, the Alcazar. It has some really amazing history here. But we picked it because honestly, we applied to quite a few German schools. And then you realize actually how many languages there are in Spain. We thought Valencia would be great, but they also speak Valenciano in their schools. And our kids didn't need to learn a 4th language, especially one that is very local, like Valenciano, that will be applicable nowhere else but Valencia. And then in the north of Spain, there's quite a few areas that have different dialects and languages. Like the Basque Country has a fascinating language. It's like the only Indo-European language on the continent still. It's like related to no other language on the European continent. And that's having a revival in the Basque Country, like San Sebastian area. And then Galicia has its own language as well. So we really wanted a place that spoke, the like Spanish. And Madrid is a big city, probably would have taken us as well. But we didn't necessarily want to be in a giant city with little kids. I thought being in Sevilla is a great size. It's like 700,000 people, but it's very compact. You can get across it in like maybe an hour and a half if you walk. And with a bus, it's even, of course, easier. But there's just so much to see in the old central area. But then we're actually just right outside that. So we have parks and plazas. And it feels like real Spanish life in many ways. Like there's no other like tourists staying around here necessarily, but we're very close to center. So we can go down there and see all the different things. So it's the best of both worlds in that way. But it was funny how they'll take us and let's move there for 1 year. And here we are 3 years later. So you never know. It's good that we ended up liking it, I guess, and not finding out like, oh, this was a poor first choice. It's worked out really well, is what I'm saying. So it's been great to be in Sevilla. And there's so much around here as well that I think if people are coming to Spain, I see it a lot. They're like, I'm coming for 1 week. I'm going to try to see blah, 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 and see like 7 locations. And I get the desire. But again, I talk about slow travel a lot on my podcast. I think there's so much value in spending a couple days or more in each location and not just seeing Sevilla and then popping up to Madrid or popping over to Barcelona. But there's so many, the Pueblo Blancos, these white villages. Cadiz is like one of the oldest cities. It's an hour away by train and has so much going on there, and it's right on the beach. So you could spend, honestly, weeks in just Andalusia alone, especially if you like nature and getting out. And so I think it's worth really evaluating what's important to you in a trip before planning it so that you can make sure to do what's most important to you and not only take every person's advice from the internet or the Facebook groups. But that's what we found is that Sevilla offers a lot. And we're also 2 hours by car to the Algarve, the south of Portugal. We spent a week there at the end of March and had perfect weather, and there's caves and there's amazing beaches and rocks to climb on. It was honestly, it blew my mind every day. We were doing something cool and different, and I can't wait to go back. I was like, we're coming back next year. That's the cool thing about being able to be in a location longer is we get to explore things that, I mean, the Algarve is well known, but it's nice when it's that accessible that you can almost go back and explore more parts that we didn't get to see yet.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the couple of the coolest things as I'm thinking about this of being in Europe, almost anywhere in Europe, to be honest, is there's so many places that you can get to so quickly and easily and affordably, typically. And not only that, but one of the things that kind of hit me as well is like even though you're in it's a populous city. I mean, 700,000 people is nothing to sneeze at. But when we think about being somewhere like in the States and maybe finding something a little bit historic and having some history in a place, even though it's modern, our history's back a couple hundred years, literally 250 years this year, right? But when you're talking about being in a modern city that probably still has some very historic sites within it, those historic sites are hundreds and hundreds of years old, and the history there is so much greater. And so I love that blend of I can go get, whatever, wherever I want, anything modern, I can get all the technology that I want, but I can also step back in time and really step back in time, within a few blocks of all that modern technology. So I think it's awesome.
A lot of the locations were filming sites here in Andalusia for Game of Thrones. And I've never actually watched that, but I've seen clips, like photos of Plaza de España from the movie. And then, we have our kids in the same kind of same kind of pose or something. It's kind of funny to compare the two. Obviously, that was filmed more modern, but it was set in a very historic time. So, of course, they came to somewhere like Spain to find castles to be able to film these different scenes. It's fascinating the way they've been able to really find pride in a lot of this history, maintain it. Obviously, there's a big tourist drive to do that, but I also think a lot of the people really they take pride in the history of their region and their community. And I do wonder, I mean, we're not there yet school-wise, but I'm like, of course, every kid has to take in the US, like American history and different history. I'm like, how do they really cover Spanish history when, technically the Iberian Peninsula has been occupied by humans for, like what, 10,000 years or something crazy? Like, how do you actually cover history when you're like a Spanish student growing up? I think that's somewhat fascinating to compare it to, like, I remember studying like 100 years at a time in US history. And I think here they have to study like 500 years at a time because there's just so much of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. I didn't even think about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
wow. I wonder how much, and I think the education systems are very different, right? But I wonder how much they have to, how do they choose what to cover, and how much
Yeah.
do you have to remember? And that's
Yeah.
nuts. So
Yeah.
tell me,
That's true.
if you don't mind, not to put you on the spot, but because I'm sure you've done a fair amount, you already mentioned some, like in your travels, whether it's in Sevilla or maybe even trips you've taken since you've been there, or wherever you'd like to go. But I'm interested to hear some like real memories and experiences that you've had in your travels, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. Absolutely. So a few that came up when I was thinking about this today were some really important trips in my like late 20s, 30s. A few of them were during that 1 year I took off. And again, some of that travel was solo, some was with a friend, some was with group tours for various reasons. But there were 3 different trips during that year that were really important to me. And one of them, pandas have always been my favorite animal since I was a kid. I remember watching The Great Panda Adventure as a movie. I always had, once I love my mom, but once she knew that I like pandas, I think like every birthday I got a panda. And so it's one of those things that just persisted. Or if someone is traveling and they see something with a panda, they'll bring it back to me. But thought it would be really cool to take advantage of this time off that I had. And I did 2.5 weeks guided tour through China. But part of it was to work at the panda reserves. And I'm probably remembering the name incorrectly, but there was the Wulong Reserve that was affected by an earthquake in 2008. And so we went to the one that was now being used in lieu of that one while they were repairing that one. And we spent about 3 days. This was not like a zoo. This is where they do maintain them. They study. They help when there is a pregnancy and a babies. They help make sure. But it's there to help conserve the animals. And they also use that information to help with tracking the pandas that are in the wild so that they can understand the numbers that are out in the wild. And we all know that they were on the endangered list for a long time. Pandas need a large space to roam because they eat so much bamboo. And so with a lot of the growth and development in some of their natural habitat, their numbers have declined over the years. And so to be able to live and work at this panda reserve after years of oh, it's my favorite animal was really special. But they didn't let us just go there and feed them and cuddle them and take some photos. We were cleaning up panda poop. We were helping prepare the panda cakes. We were moving things around. It was a pretty small group, and we were paired with someone from the conservation so that they would tell us what to do and where to go. And, we had to wear certain panda jumpsuits. Well, they weren't panda. They didn't look like a panda, but it was a jumpsuit. We had to wash our hands. If we were near the pandas, we had to wear a mask. So I thought that was really important to see the steps that they took to protect the animals, but also it was fascinating, feed them. We did have a few moments where we could take up close personal photos, help, play with the babies and stuff like that. And that's just honestly something that you can't, zoos maybe are controversial, maybe not, but they do a lot of good work around understanding the animals, conserving it, making sure that the next generation is passionate about these animals because they're accessible, because you can go to the zoo and see them. But you don't always get to have these up close and personal animal encounters, especially in their more natural habitat, right? To be in China to do this. So that was a very special trip that it culminated years. It was also after a terrible job that I was happy to leave. So it was so nice to finally be on this trip. And China was fascinating. I think there were 6 of us, and I was the youngest, and every other woman there was in her 60s. So, and they were all British. So I was best friends with the British grandmas. And we ate Chinese food every day. I mean, by the end, I was okay, I think I'm ready to leave China. But China has some fascinating history too, of course, the China Wall. There's just so much to see. And I've not been back since. And that's a country I just have no idea if and when we'll get back there at some point. It's not somewhere I want to go with young kids because so many of those cities are giant. We would fly to a city to kind of get towards the panda conservation and things like that. And it was a city that I can't even remember. I didn't even know the name of, and it had 12 million people. And that just blew my mind to think of how big and populated China is. And even now with my son, we talk about population, right? China, India, all over 1 billion. And then third is the US at 380 million. So it is hard to really picture how many people live in India and how many people live in China. And then when you're there and you see these high rises and you see how things work, and then you're in the rural context as well. And then of course, all the motos that have a whole family on it because that's the transportation. So that was a very impactful trip. But to be able to have a close encounter with an animal that was really special to me was amazing.
Do you remember the feeling of when you first got to actually interact with?
Yes. And
Yeah.
it's funny. I have a lot of photos of this time, but no videos because that wasn't really as common then, the way the cameras were necessarily. But I just remember being so giddy, so excited to see, the adult pandas, but of course, the toddler pandas are amazing and adorable. And the way they just roll and play and, it was just fascinating. They're one of those animals that you could watch them for an hour and either it's they do nothing but eat bamboo, or they're constantly moving and doing something, and the babies are jumping and doing crazy things. There's panda cams at like the Washington Zoo when they had pandas, and different things that I've periodically tuned into every once in a while. It's just so funny what the way pandas are. And then understanding why it's so difficult for them to reproduce. And, seeing pictures like the babies are born the size of like a stick of butter. They're so tiny. And you're like, how did they not just roll over and squish this baby? It's like everything is stacked up against the pandas. This is one reason they have low numbers, you could say, but part of it's not their fault, of course. And I think it's so important that these animals are being protected, because when people take efforts and time and money and research to protect pandas, I think that trickles down to other important animals that are on the endangered list, that maybe don't have as much infamy as pandas. We know that China uses pandas for panda diplomacy, and that can be, there's reasons they do that, let's say. But it's fascinating to see the efforts that were being taken to take care of them, and just how the people really cared about the animals as well. And I've been to other places where there's pandas. Like we went to the Berlin Zoo last summer, and it was nice to see them. It's just not the same once you've been in a panda enclosure, cleaning up their poop, or taking a photo sitting right next to one and kind of have it. Yeah, it was one of those bucket list type trips, and I'm happy I did it when I did. And I just don't know if it'll ever, something similar would happen again. My kids do not have the same passion for pandas. So
But you said you played with the babies. Like you actually got to like hold them and touch them and
we had about 45 minutes. Like we went in two groups, I remember, because I would take photos. Like we were just outside when it wasn't our turn, but we could still see. So I was taking photos of like my friend in the group. And then when I was in there, she was taking photos, so that I wasn't trying to like take photos. So I could just be in the moment. And we were able to like play, like toss some toys, like some of the balls to the baby pandas. And then they had this spot where they did try to have one sit kind of near us, like not on our lap or anything. Like I obviously wanted, it was actually important for me to see that they weren't only doing this for tourists. It was like, of course, something that they do for probably various reasons, probably some of the money that they get from it, but it really wasn't like the only purpose of this place. And so I thought that was really cool to see that they were like, okay, yeah, we'll let you do these things because we know you came here for a reason, but ultimately, we're still going to make sure that these animals are protected. But yeah, we were able to be in this little, like kind of little enclosure with the baby ones, the little ones, not the babies, but the more like toddler ones, which honestly are the ones, they're more fun. They're just rolling around and they want to play with you a little bit more. And yeah, it was really cool.
yeah, that's really awesome. I can't even imagine, because to have such a passion for something like that, which it's not like a loving dogs. You can see dogs and cats all over the place. So just I can't imagine how much joy that had to have brought you.
It was,
and I can tell that it's still so impactful on you. So that's really awesome.
on that same trip. That was actually, let's see, no, this was right before.
Mhm.
I did like a week staying with some friends in Korea. And then I went to Nepal and I did the Everest Base Camp trek. And I did it with a guide. It was just another couple from New York on their 3-month honeymoon and me. I was like, hey guys, crashing your honeymoon. And we had the most amazing guide and porters. And we made our way up to Lukla, which is where you start on your about 12 to 14 days. I think it took us about 14 days to get up and back to the Everest Base Camp. And it was in November, so that's not when people are actually at Everest Base Camp to prepare for summiting. That's happening, I think, right now, actually, in May. It's the other season where there's decent weather. And so it's not as popular as the springtime, but still quite busy at times. And it's very weather dependent. So Lukla is this airport. It's one of the most dangerous airports in the world because it's literally on the side of a cliff, way up high. And you're flying around the amazing Himalayas on your way there. And that airport had been closed for 6 days because of terrible weather. And so there were so many people waiting at the airport trying to get on a flight. And I don't know, we must have picked a really great organization because they're like, we're getting you guys up to Lukla. And so they said, nope, skip the plane. hop in this helicopter. So we took this helicopter to a lower site, not all the way up to Lukla. We still had to hike like another 2 hours up, which was fine. But that was amazing because we were lower. We were zipping through these mountains in a helicopter. You could like see, I mean, the Nepalese people are so fascinating. I went back years later to do a research project in my master's program, and we interviewed women in the hills, and that was really great to connect with Nepalese women in a different way. But you see people living, I mean, they live in very rural areas, and we made our way up to Lukla that way. And then finally, the next day, the weather was clear and we got to start on our trek. And there was not as many people ahead of us because they had all been stuck not getting there. So it's just crazy how that timing worked out. And we had amazing weather. It was one of the most challenging things I've ever done, not just physically, but also being able to breathe at those high altitude levels. We saw people have problems with altitude sickness and how they tend to them. And also, I mean, just what the Nepalese people are able, the porters carry so many things on their back. I'm, struggling under my like day pack, and then you'll be passed by someone literally carrying like a mini fridge and food and raw meat and everything. It's just fascinating to see how that infrastructure works to let the people that hike up to Everest Base Camp, how it's possible. There's stay in the huts along the way. And it's only warm in the kitchen area because they put the cow dung in there so that's what heats it up when they don't have like obviously wood above tree line. And it was cold at times. It was absolutely just amazing mountains and scenery and the yaks and everything. It was just amazing. The people you meet that are so kind, and the kids just running around like this is their home. Their family lives in Namche Bazaar, which is like 4 days up. It's the last big town before you keep going up. But we made it to Everest Base Camp and did not want to or did not have time to go a little bit more and have a nice view of Everest. I'm not like obsessed with Everest. I have zero desire to go any further than that. I wasn't like I have to see only this peak. I think everything about the experience is what I was there for. And it was phenomenal. It was the coolest thing ever. And then we get back to Kathmandu and go have finally like another warm meal. And we made it back. And I was like, finally, I get to take like a shower. And the water was freezing. So I had like a freezing shower after like 2 weeks of almost no shower. I remember being very disappointed. And then also I had a mango lassi, which probably was a poor choice because the next day I was flying out and I was like vomiting at the airport, but I'm like, I have to get on this plane and get out of here. So it did not end very well, but I will say the rest of the trip was amazing. And it is, like I said, I went back there and did research. We interviewed women for a project that was very special. It's like on my to-do list. Like I got to go back when my kids are a certain age that I think they can really understand, the history of the Nepalese people and really get to experience the kindness and the welcoming spirit of the people. But it's also somewhere that I would like to see more of the mountains. So I'd have to make sure I do it before I get too old, but also when my kids are old enough to hike some. And we'll probably I'll never do the Everest Base Camp again, but there's of course some other amazing treks that are even less crowded, thankfully. It'd be amazing to do something different. So that is on my I want to go back list was Nepal. But that's a fascinating country, with obviously they've been through a lot. And I would say most people certainly don't have a lot. And I know that they work really hard. And I'm sure they would trade places with me in a heartbeat, some of them. But at the same time, the way they take care of each other and are good stewards to their country and the nature aspects of it, I think it's a fascinating place to go.
Yeah, I'm not like huge into mountains. I appreciate their beauty, and it's not really a big thing for me. I don't know that I have a desire to go to Nepal, but I also do find it very fascinating. Especially, I've heard multiple stories of people who have done the Everest hike, and yeah, like you're saying, like the porters are just like they're just rambling up and down like nothing's, but they've been doing it all their lives or however long they've been doing it. And then these families, I think, which is almost the most fascinating part to me, is these families who live, like you said, above the tree line. And that's, they've chosen to be there. And obviously they're part of their livelihood, I assume, is probably letting these people in to stay with them overnight and feed them and whatnot. They're receiving compensation for that, and
Mhm.
obviously they get their food and stuff delivered
Yeah.
to them probably by the porters and everything, so they're taken care of. But it's just fascinating to me that that's what they've chosen to do with their
Mhm.
lives and their families. And I just feel like it's so isolating, but at the same time, they get to meet so many people as well. And I don't know. I guess it's probably very fulfilling for them. So it's just very cool.
Yeah, I've thought about that. You're right. Like, I find a lot of value in being able to go to new places, and I recognize that there's a big chunk of this world that will never have the freedom and the flexibility to travel and the money to do it as thankfully I've been able to. But it's how interesting it is. And, I don't wanna speak for anyone. I imagine some people really like it, and maybe some people don't always love that they depend on tourism. But I imagine there's something really cool about being able to, this is my home, this is what I know, this is what we do, this is what I've been doing my whole life. So there's like the comfort that comes with it, and your whole family's there, of course. But then you have this opportunity to see new people and maybe make opinions about people from this country. Oh, the Germans are here. They're gonna I mean, I say that jokingly. They're usually very nice people. Um, or, I just wonder what it's like for them to have such exposure to people from different countries, but have most likely not been to any of those countries, maybe not ever will go to any of those countries. So it's like this way to have this very traditional, life and probably very little access. I mean, yes, there's, like, internet up there, but very little access to maybe what we feel like is the outside world, but yet people are coming through your door every day from all over the world. So they bring their own flavor, their own languages, their own accents, their own way of being and talking, and so I wonder how that feels to have such this dichotomy of this international world at your doorstep, but also living such a, traditional life in the way like I would see it. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. And we've talked about on the podcast before, like when even here in the States, like you kind of live in your own bubble. And if you don't allow yourself to escape from that bubble, like you don't know what you don't know. And even if you are experiencing other people coming into your country and maybe in their case into your home, if you haven't actually experienced the world and experienced the travel, you don't know what you don't know. And so I imagine, just like anyone else, if they were exposed to actually traveling and going and visiting other places, then maybe that becomes more of a passion and a thing, just like it does for us. But
Mhm.
if you're not exposed to it, you don't have the access to it, then you don't know what you're missing out on it. And maybe that's ignorance is bliss. And I didn't mean that as any sort of a bad derogatory
Yeah,
in any way. It's just, if you're happy with what you have, it's great. That's absolutely great.
absolutely. Sometimes I think that would be easier to not have such wanderlust,
Yes.
but
Easier, cheaper.
yeah, exactly. And also, it is true. Like, I think about this with my children. Like, I understand that they are having some really cool opportunities that not every kid of their age has had access to. But I will never know what they would have been like without it because this is what we've chosen so far. Of course, who knows what the future will bring? Just like I don't know what I would be like if I hadn't taken as many important travels in my life. They've just become part of who I am. And I hope that that has made me a more compassionate, empathetic, caring, kind person. But I'm also still a human. I get frustrated. Like, I'm not perfect. So I don't know what it would be like because I don't have anything to compare it to for my little case study of one for me. And I don't know what that would be like for the other people in my life too. I think overall, a lot of people that travel say, I think it's important. I think it's great to do at least some when you can, to just see something different, have access to knowing that the world is this big, beautiful place and that the vast majority of people are just kind and trying to do the best and live a good life. And they're going to help you and try not to focus on like the things that don't always go right because it's easy to sometimes dwell on the one or two things that goes wrong during a trip. Like with our Naples trip, we had some things that weren't always the smoothest and the motos were crazy. But then I think about this family, we were waiting by a bus stop forever. And I was like, when's this bus coming? None of the apps that I thought were working would tell me anything. And I asked with Google Translate to a family. And, I told him, he asked where I was going. And then a bus came. And so we just got on it and they got on it too. And like within 5 minutes after the bus, he came all the way through the bus. Like they were with a baby even. And he, with his Google Translate, had written telling me where I should get off and what I should do next. So he went out of his way to make sure that I had the information to get back to where I needed to go. So I thought, there's so much kindness that we should be focusing on. And, that's one reason that I continue to travel, because people surprise you in really unique ways. I have another story that's similar to that. It's like
please.
the third one from, I would say, that year that I just had these amazing experiences. It was in Morocco. We went there in December for a friend's 30th birthday. There were 4 of us. So it's 3 girls and a guy. Our friend was the one that was turning 30, the guy. And so it maybe was convenient that we at least had one male with us as a group of girls. I remember we went into one scarf shop, and he looked around. He's like, to our friend Andy, he's like, you have 3 wives? And then after that, that was our joke. Like, okay, Andy, you got to pick up dinner because we're your 3 wives. But part of the trip was like on his 30th birthday, we had camel rides into the desert. So we took like the van there, and then we get to where you get started, and we got there late at night, or not late at night, like later in the afternoon. And we had picked up a cake with our driver because it was his birthday the next day. And so we wanted to have it out in the desert with us. But we put it in the fridge in this landing zone that we were at so that it wouldn't get too hot. And then we get on our camels, we get all our stuff, and then we're going, and we were like, oh no, we forgot the cake. We were so disappointed. We're like, okay, I guess we'll just have it tomorrow, And so we get out there into the desert. We get set up where we're sleeping. The food is there, the Berber tents, the music, the moonlight, you're just surrounded by desert. It was so magical. And out of the blue, the guy who led us out there on the camels, he produces the cake with candles, surprises all of us. So not only did we surprise the birthday boy, and I think actually that was his birthday, now that I think about it, but he surprised not just the birthday boy, but us too. Like, it was so special that he went out of his way to like sneak this cake on a camel so that we could have it out in the under the stars in the Moroccan desert, the Saharan desert. So that trip was really cool. The next morning we got to climb in the desert, and then we had to take the camels back out and came back to Germany to like snow. So it was a very special trip. I learned a lot, and I was very impressed with like the Moroccan landscape, and the people were so kind. And we went back last year because Spain is very close to Morocco. And we went back last year with my kids and a family or a friend of my husband who spent a lot of time in Morocco, and he doesn't have kids. So he's like, let's see as much as we can. And since he was driving, we ended up fitting a lot more in the trip than we probably should have. So we spent more time in the car than we should have. It's one of those like, better until you sometimes make those mistakes again. But we did the desert trip, and we show up, and maybe I didn't ask the right questions because I just assumed that if we were having a night in the desert, we were going to sleep out in the desert. But now, and I understand that they need to environmentally take care of the dunes and the desert, and this probably makes a lot of sense. But all of the camps are along the edge of the desert, and you take a camel ride out into the dunes and you watch sunset. It was wonderful. It was great. We got some cool photos. My kids loved it. It was gorgeous. But there was something in me that said, oh, I didn't even realize that it wasn't going to be the same. In my mind, it was going to be similar, and we were going to be sleeping out there. So it's just funny how, times change, places change. It's a good reminder that if there's something that's calling your name, don't wait too long, because maybe that activity will be inaccessible, or you won't be able to do it, or it'll change or shift, or, and I understand they need to take care of their environmental concerns and things too. And we still had an amazing time, but it was just so different for me to compare it to this like once in a lifetime, this amazing special experience that my friend and we all still talk about to this day. So it's a good reminder to take the trip when you can, if it's important to you, because you never know when it might not be the same experience as what you might be able to have.
Yeah, that's something I guess I don't really think about very often. First of all, you almost made it to the desert without your dessert, but we did end up having that. So that's
we did have the cake. It was so amazing to have this cake in the middle of the desert and have surprised us all. And yeah, it's like one of those things like burned into your brain, So this is why I like travel. Is you get these I call them memory dividends. Yes, you have to spend time, money, effort. I get it. But you will have these memories forever. And so I get to talk about that story or replay it, or whenever Morocco comes up, that like it just gets into my brain. I just remember this special moment, and that gets to play over and over in my head. So those are the things that keep paying for the trip, like keep paying me back for the trip over and over and over.
Oh, I don't know if you coined that phrase yourself, but I'm stealing it from you, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I
go for it.
love it.
I've heard it
Memory
somewhere.
dividends.
Yes, memory dividends. Like, because people talk about saving and investing because, it'll pay you dividends for the rest of your life. And I'm like, those are important. Don't get me wrong. You got to take care of, I'm a money coach. So I'd be wrong to tell you not to save and invest as well. But there are also other meaningful things that you get from investing in travel, and the memory dividends are what I think can be really important. And sometimes it's type 2 fun. I don't know if have you heard that phrase before? Type 2 fun?
No, I don't think so.
So, okay. Type 1 fun is when you're having fun in the moment. That's usually why we like to travel, is because we're enjoying the moment. Type 2 fun is where it was not fun in the moment. Like you are hiking up this mountain, you're like every step, you're just like cursing. Why did I sign up for this hike or this trip or whatever? But when it's over, you're like, wow, I'm really happy I did that. Or like, oh my gosh, our car was broken down on the side of the road. We thought we were going to get hit by a semi or something, but we survived. And now we get to like laugh about this memory later. That's type 2 fun. And I think there's value in type 2 fun. I think about that with my kids. Like, I'm not going to make sure every day is type 1 fun. There has to be something that's going to be type 2 fun, where it's not always fun in the moment, but we're going to be stronger because we've gotten through this experience. Or if things go wrong because I didn't plan on it going wrong, we've had suitcases stolen and some crazy stuff happen here and there. We're going to get through it. We're going to be okay. And later we can laugh about it. And that's the type 2 fun part of it.
You know what's funny is I think now that you've said it in that way, we've had a lot of type 2 fun memories shared on this podcast. And I think a lot of times those are the ones that kind of stand out. Like it's
true.
Type 1 is a lot of times something that is really vivid in your own memory, but it's not necessarily a story to tell. It's
exactly,
this place was beautiful and the experience was amazing. And you can't even imagine what the sunset looked like. But again, it's hard to share that with someone else unless they've actually also seen it. But the type 2s, those are the ones that are a lot easier because they are inherently stories that need to be told.
Exactly.
So that being said, I'm putting you on the spot again. Do you have any other type 2s that just jump to mind? Maybe not like yes, it was exhausting and it was, very tough, challenging, and it was so rewarding at the end. But you mentioned suitcases, or anything like that. What do you got?
That's the one that does still come up. It was a suitcase. It was literally day 1 of landing in Sevilla almost 3 years ago. And we had 4 suitcases and 4 little ones and two car seats, and the kids are running around, and we were trying to get into the Airbnb, and there was a gate. So the taxi let us out, and we had all our stuff there, and we were trying to get into the gate and then try to get stuff past the gate and into the house. And like 45 minutes later, we're like, where's the 4th suitcase? And we, at some point in bringing it in or something, it was gone. And we know we had it because I still had the like luggage tag. So I definitely had picked it up. And so we feel like it was probably this opportunistic, because there were so many gates. Like if we were inside and there's a lot of people always walking by because people are outside. So it was a 50-pound suitcase, a 4th of the stuff we brought over. Thankfully, it was like not the electronics. It was not all the clothing for me or the kids, but it was the suitcase that had things like our stockings because we wanted to have those for Christmas that year. Some important books that had been signed by family, medications, contacts, like ski gear, stuff that was honestly just annoying and expensive to replace. It also had, my lovely aunt gives every kid when they're born, like when my kids are born, one of those LL Bean boat bags with their names initialed on it. So we had that bag in there because it's a great beach bag. And I remember being so sad that bag was gone. 2 days later, we're at the park just around the corner from where we were staying. And again, this is August. The air conditioning also went out in that place. There were bugs all over. There was like ants in the first floor if we left any food out. My husband actually left right away to go back to Germany to get his driver's license renewed. So it's like just me dealing with jet lag and toddlers. and, dealing with like, oh, we had a suitcase stolen, the AC's out. So, but we go to this park, this playground, and this woman kind of walks by. And then I realize she's holding that boat bag. And I know it because it has my son's initials on it. And I'm like, I walk up to her and I'm like, Google Translate, how do you have this bag? And she says she got it in a trash can. Cause I think a lot of people, when if they are opportunistic thieves, they open stuff up and they're like, take whatever good stuff and then maybe just throw in a trash can the rest of the stuff. So we looked in that trash can, stuff was all gone. She willingly gave it back to me, which was nice. And so we still have that bag. And so every time I see it, I just remember. And I took a picture of her and then I figured out where the police station was and we went there, but it was getting a little late and my kids were like over it. So I went back the next day and did a police report and they're like, oh yeah, we know her. I was like, what? So I was like, maybe there's hope, that stuff will come back to us. I mean, we got nothing back, but still, that is one of those stories. Like, it's almost like you need something like that to just remind you to keep a hold of your stuff, be cautious. I've not had anything like that happen in Spain in the 3 years since. And partly it's just because I take the right precautions. I'm not going to let someone opportunistically take stuff. I'm not going to make it easy on them. And that was our story that led to that. But I'm really happy I have like the one item from that because my mom even was able to make the stockings again. Pretty much everything else was replaceable. But to have the exact boat bag from my, first kid's birth, basically, that we still have, it was such a crazy story to be able to somehow get that back.
I love stories like that where not only, okay, it's you have the initial, yeah, it's stolen, whatever, and you're going through in your mind like a mental inventory of what's in there. But that just like you said, that one thing that probably meant the most out of the entire thing, you just happened to be in the right place at the right time and you see it. Because if you hadn't been there at that moment, you may have never seen it again.
I know. It's crazy. It was just so random that I was even like on that side of the park and the way she walked, I was able to see the initials on it. Yeah, that's something that's been like kind of one of those memories as well. But you bring up a good point because that was that's something they'll never forget, right? And that was the not so good story, right? But then I can capture 3 years of living in Spain. I can say, oh, it's been great. We've met some great people. We've seen some cool things, and that captures in general all the good parts. But then there's going to be at least one story that you can probably spend 10 minutes on that is the rough part or the things didn't go as well or this happened, So I do try to focus on, of course, the good parts, but sometimes those other stories are just, they have to be told.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I love it. Before we get toward the end and get to our final 5 questions, I feel like I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of places that you've been. Are there any other stories or memories that you feel like you absolutely have to share from any of the places that you've been? I'm not in a hurry. I just,
Okay.
being mindful of people's time.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And your time too. I'll say just one quick one because it ties back to a trip we took.
And you don't have to make it quick.
Oh, okay. It was like we went to Germany because again, we stayed with sometimes family friends there. And it was after I graduated high school. And we also had stayed with a few families through this organization called Servas. And this is one way that my parents could financially afford to travel is we would, through this organization, you would reach out to these families and, if they could host you, you would. And the standard was 2 nights. So it's long enough that you get to know each other, but not so long that you're impeding in their life, right? And we were somewhere in southern Germany or Switzerland at this house. And they're like, actually, we're going to go. My husband's working up in the mountains, right, with the sheep. And so we need to go visit him. And so part of this time with them was following them in our rental car. And then we had to hike a ways. And this is like in the mountains. It's June, but it's like sleeting and snowing. And then we get to all the animals and to this little hut that he stays in up with the animals, and they hosted, we had fondue and of course, fresh cheese from all the animals. And I just remember thinking like, this is something I don't think my parents could have even like planned for or paid for, right? Especially back in the day. And it was just through the kindness of strangers and through this organization where people want to get to know each other because we know that the more we, spend time getting to know each other and understand each other, we can look each other as humans and not just, oh, that person from that country, and it can really break down a lot of walls between people. And so I highly recommend that organization. We did other travels growing up, and it's one that I just met someone in Italy. A woman and her daughter were staying with Servas families in northern Italy, and it's something that I have been wanting to do now, because if you can stay with families that have kids, like, wow, your kids get to have this cool opportunity. We did that again. That's one reason we were at that house, that they had kids as well. So I think there's amazing organizations out there that, again, you get the benefit of also being hosted. Usually they're providing a meal and a place to stay, which is huge if travel is expensive for you, but also the cultural exchange is invaluable. And there's ways to do that and just have a richer experience for some of that. And sometimes they're awkward experiences. They're not always perfect like that, but that one is, my brother and I have talked about for years, like when we're up there eating fondue in like the mountains, and it was just crazy to get up there. So it was really, really cool that you're hearing all the cowbells around you. It was fascinating.
Yeah, that's the kind of a thing today that you would pay extra for on
Mhm.
some sort of a trip through,
Yeah.
you know, somebody arranging something like that. Like you said, like you don't even think your mom and dad probably would have been able to arrange something like that. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. And we talk a lot too about how on the podcast we talk, and it's this podcast has always been intended to be let's share stories. But what's developed over the year plus that I've been doing this is humanity comes into it a lot, and how especially and listen, there's a lot of really wonderful human beings here in the States that would
Of
love to
course.
open their doors to people, but I think we're a lot more suspicious of people here, and I don't know what's caused that for us, but I've heard so many genuinely heartwarming and incredible stories of people being in other countries and just having people open their doors to them, whether it's just, they're in a very remote place and they're in need and somebody has a home and they allow them to come in and they share a meal. And even if they don't speak the same language at all, can still have just magical moments, or whatever the case may be, being at a restaurant or a bar and just running into a stranger who invites you over to their house for dinner, and then you share a meal with a huge family, and those memories are special and incredible. I don't know that I've had something specifically like that happen to me. I wish and I hope and I dream someday that will, because I just think those stories are magical. I don't know if you have anything like that that's ever happened to you, but besides the fondue, in the mountains. But I just think that if we open ourselves up to having conversations with strangers, I think the world becomes a smaller and better place all at the same time. So just my little 2 cents.
Absolutely. And I think, because we have this mini computer in our pocket with our phones, that there's so many things that we actually don't need to ask someone about anymore. Like we used to have to, like, hey, this is a map. Where am I going? Like a paper map, right? And so that has, I think, shifted some of those. And so I remember when I asked that gentleman at the bus stop in Naples, Italy, where I was going, my kids were like, Mom, you're embarrassing us. And yet, out of that moment, I had this where I was so grateful that he gave me the train that I needed to take, because this bus was not the one we thought we were going to be taking. And so it worked out really well. And it's because I, took a risk and I asked the stranger for a question, and it wasn't like a huge ask. But because of phones, we don't always need to put ourselves in those situations. And I think it's okay to do that. And sometimes it's just asking someone to like take your picture. And then every time we do that, my husband, like when he gets the phone back from them, if they took our photo, he's like, best picture you ever took, and like you have a little joke or you ask where they're from. So little things like that are opportunities for conversation. And it doesn't always have to be a lot, but it's one way to at least get a conversation started with someone from somewhere else. And you just never know where it'll lead you, or at least you get to have a nice, friendly moment with a person, which we don't always need to have those interactions anymore. And so sometimes you have to force them or go out of your way to make those opportunities.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before too, having spent some time working in technology, like understanding that even though, yeah, it's great, maps have come such a long way, so it's an easy way to find a place if you're lost or you just need direction. But as far as other things go, even trying to find a great restaurant or trying to find a site to see or whatever, we are only getting out of the technology what human beings are putting into it. So even though there's a wealth of information there, more than we even need, there are things that you will not get from Google. You will not get them. So don't be afraid if you're in another city or country or someplace else to still ask a local, because not only that, but things change constantly. There might be a brand new place that just opened up that their family knows the family, and it's not there. You will not find it by looking at Google, and you'll have an incredible experience, just by asking somebody a question. So anyway,
Yeah, very well said.
yeah. So if you're good, I feel like we could keep talking for another hour and a half. But in the interest of time, I'd say if you're good with it, we'll jump into the
Yeah.
final 5 questions.
That works.
And feel free to take as much time with your answers as you'd like. And if any other stories come to mind, the floor will be yours. But without further ado, I will ask you. And I phrased this question. Have you heard these yet? Did you go all the way through to the end of any?
I did. That's where I think she said Sevilla, Spain. But to be honest, I remember thinking like I should think more about this, and then I didn't think of my answers necessarily. So it'll be whatever comes to mind.
That's excellent. Well, either way, like I'm sure there's no right or wrong on any of these.
Yeah, of course.
So question number 1, and everyone hears me say this every time, but I phrase it very carefully because I've had people say it had nothing to do with the food. So I say, question number 1 is, of all the places in the world that you've ever been, and I used to add this, outside of the home that you're living in, what has been the 1 or 2 most memorable meal experiences that you have ever had?
And it has to be memorable. Well, memorable doesn't. You're right. Like you said, it could be good or bad, right?
It good or bad, and it could be the food was great. It could be the company. It could be anything.
Yeah. This makes me think of tropical chicken in Peru. There was not really great because a couple of us got food poisoning, and we linked it back to the tropical chicken. And I remember thinking, like, seeing on the menu, we were joking for a while, like, chicken, what is that? Like, is the chicken like got a Mai Tai with an umbrella, the chicken sipping on? And then I think like the chicken got us back because we all got food poisoning. And so every time like chicken comes up, that's with my sister, my husband's sister, that she was also sick. We're always like, oh, that's the tropical chicken. So that's always been a memorable one.
What is it? It's a 2. It's not a first memory, but a second.
yeah,
what was that? Type 2.
Type 2.
Yeah.
Type 2 fun. Exactly.
Type 2 tropical chicken.
Type 2 for sure.
Absolutely.
And I think that's because honestly, like I love food. I enjoy almost every food everywhere. So it's hard to be like one amazing meal just because honestly, I like a lot of things. Like most of it's like really good. But it is those memories, those meals that you get sick from or taste terrible or something that do tend to stick out more, be more memorable.
Well, first of all, so what made the chicken tropical, just out of curiosity?
It like had this tiny canned like the tropical canned fruit that was like, what is it? Like a pineapple pear, it's kind of this like not great canned fruit.
Like a fruit cocktail?
Yes, like a fruit cocktail. Like kind of on the side of it. Like that's it. So it wasn't even like really worth, like it wasn't like it made it so amazing that it was worth getting sick from.
Yeah. Is there, I'm putting you on the spot again. I love doing this. Is there any like, just that it doesn't have to be the best ever, but like, is there any like just incredible meal that stands out that you could share that you remember?
We are a pizza family, and just being in Naples was really great to just basically have an excuse to eat pizza every day.
Mm-hmm.
But the fried pizza, I didn't even know was a thing. It was really good. Like even so, it's like fried dough, cheeses. And some of it had ricotta, so it got like kind of liquidy, which sounds terrible. But for some reason, it all just came together. And you just get to like eat it in this little handheld thing on the.
Thank you. Someone else who finally understands what fried pizza is like. It was one of the most magical things I've ever had in my life.
Oh,
and
so cool.
I didn't have it in Naples. And it's a story. I've already told it a couple of times on the podcast. I won't make our listeners go through it again. I can tell you offline if you're interested. But it's so incredible. Love it.
That's awesome.
Okay.
That's good. I'm glad that pizza.
Yes, and I am a little jealous that you actually got to have it in Naples. But anyways, I digress. So question number 2, moving on. This is one of my favorite questions. I say it every time just for the variety of answers, and some people don't have an answer. But question number 2, Suzy, of all the places in the world that you have ever been, if I was to come to you and say, here is a free trip for you and your family, go have fun, and then, let me know how it was, you'd say, no, thank you, I don't want to go back.
Oh. I would say probably, I mean, I know I talked very highly of China, but it would be okay to not go back just because it was overwhelming. There's so much to see and do, and I feel like I saw a lot already, that I could do without going back, because I haven't been back in like 15 plus years, and it's not on the radar. So I'll go with that one. I feel like
Yeah, and that's
checked off the things about it that would be worth seeing for me.
and that's fair. And I've had people actually say that as a reason. They're like, "Hey, I've been there, I've done it, I don't need to
Yeah.
go back." At the same time, if it was free, maybe you would.
Included a trip to the panda conservation zoo.
Okay.
Then
Okay.
I could be convinced.
Okay. Very, very good. Okay, well, flipping that question on its head, 180 degrees. Question number 3 is, and I add a caveat now. I started this maybe in the last few months because I wanted to make it a little bit more direct. Of all the places in the world that you have been, but let's say that you only have 1 or 2 trips left in your lifetime. So you have to choose 1 or 2 places that you've been to. Of all the places, where do you absolutely have to go back to?
I'm going to say Nepal, because I did share that is on my to go back list, and Thailand, because it's so beautiful and there's so much to see and do. And I'm not really like a huge beach person, but the beaches in Thailand were just so fun and special and beautiful, and the land of smiles. People were so kind, and the food is amazing. Anything from street market food to fancy restaurant food, that has mountains. So yeah, I'll go back there.
Excellent. And that's on my short list to actually get to that I've never been. So
Yay, you've got
excellent.
real.
Yeah, I plan to someday. Okay, question number 4, and this one could be difficult. I think Malaya could be difficult, but question number 4 is, with the same caveat, of all the places in the world now that you have never been, but you only get 1 or 2 more trips left in your lifetime, where do you absolutely have to go?
One of those countries is India. Again, I talked about how, the population. I have a lot of family friends, like they're in, or not family friends, but like friends, their spouses, their family friends that are like grew up in India. I mean, it's such a giant country, diverse. Like some of these, like the last movie we saw before I had my first son was the lion one. I can't remember. It was like I was like bawling in the theater. It was like set in India. The food's amazing. I know there's beaches, there's mountains, there's everything. But I've been intimidated, and so I haven't been there yet. But it's like I gotta go. I just gotta like rip the Band-Aid off and go once, and I'm sure we'll go back. I just know it's overwhelming in a lot of ways. The smells, the sights, the noises. I wouldn't say that hectic pace is my favorite thing, but it's reality for life for a lot of people in certain parts of India. The history is fascinating. So I think that's the number one on my list.
Excellent. Well, before we get to question number 5, I always typically offer the opportunity. Has anything else jumped to mind that you want to share before we get to our final question?
Another country that I haven't spent a lot of time in, but I really want to spend more time in is actually just south of the U.S. borders. It is into Mexico. There's also a lot of like diversity in places there. I've really only been to the beach, and that's also on my like to visit list. So I'll leave that with that. And then otherwise, stories. It's been fun to share the ones that come to mind. I mean, I think what I would say, like with traveling as a family, is that you have to really adjust your needs to see things, how quickly you're going to be able to see things. Like I know that if I really want to go to this museum, I'm going to have to call it an activity center and make a game out of it for my kids to want to go. Or we've gotten to the point where I can do some like short trips solo. I just did 100 kilometers on the Camino last month. In 4.5 days. I did it like during the week. My kids are at school. My husband's working. He works from home. So that works out. And I can go do something that would not be very kid friendly, but was really meaningful to me to still have these opportunities to do travel. And again, it was like a 6-hour train ride up. I took the flight back. It was really easy to get to because of where we've landed here. But I get to do things still that are important to me, because sometimes with family travel, you don't always get to be the one to make the entire itinerary the way you want it to. You have to make sure everyone else is happy too. So that's my takeaway, is that travel isn't always going to be exactly what you think it is. It's not, you might be really excited for a location and that doesn't turn out so great. And then somewhere else that you didn't even think was going to be awesome ends up knocking your socks off. I think that's really cool. And also, maybe one last thing. We were supposed to go to Egypt, bucket list trip. A friend came up when I was living in Germany. We had this tour plan, all this stuff. She came over from the US to spend like 3 weeks, but this trip to Egypt was going to be the trip. And there was the Iceland volcano on a Thursday night. I think it was like April of 2010 or something, 2010. And the volcano that shut down the European airspace for 5 days. So, of course, we even drove to the Frankfurt airport the next day. 0 flights, no flights, tour canceled. Thankfully, everything got refunded. That worked out well. And we're like, wait, now we have a week off. What are we going to do? We road trip to Czech Republic. Some friends came over. It ended up being this amazing week that we talk about still to this day. And I have never been back to Egypt, and I don't know if I'll ever go. And so you just never know what's going to get in the way of what you originally have planned. And as a planner, sometimes that's hard. But if you keep an open mind and try to, adjust and pivot and be flexible to what the universe is trying to tell you, you might still have an amazing time. So that's one of my memories from another potentially type 2 experience that ended up being type 1 fun at the end.
Yeah, for sure. And I was going to mention when you were talking about traveling with families, and I think one of the things you would probably highly recommend, and anytime you're traveling with more than just yourself, and I guess maybe even if it is solo travel, you have to plan for flexibility. You have to. You can't be rigid on this is my itinerary and we're going to stick to it, because anything can happen. I've heard of some brutal stories with families, especially with young children, that have really altered the course of what was initially planned. But selfishly, you mentioned the Czech Republic. Did you end up in Prague?
Yes. It was like,
Tell me.
the best weather. It was like we were in the plaza, and then of course we were like, the Czech beer was great. It was a great, and also because we road tripped there, we like stopped in these little towns and found these like thermal baths, and it was one of those, the Czech Republic. Well, now it's even not Czech Republic, it's Czechia, but it's been through a lot in the relatively near history of things. And so you saw just a lot of that, like the infrastructure from the communist era, but then Prague just comes alive, and the history there, and the Bone Church was like phenomenal. So you have to be open to that. I'll also say with the family travel piece, I've hosted World School pop-up hubs. It's one thing I like about the World Schooling community is you can find other traveling families, other like-minded community, whether it's for 1 week in Naples, spending 7 days together. And it's amazing how some of these kids are a little shy on the first day, but by day 2, they're kicking a ball, they're having fun, parents are talking, and you get to help each other out. We had families from all over show up. And you build these friendships in just a couple of days. You keep in touch. And I hosted in Sevilla 2 years ago. And then a family moved here a year later, and we saw them last weekend. And we met because I had hosted this pop-up. And so there are ways to travel as a family where, of course, you get time together. But it's also really cool when you can meet other traveling families or other like-minded families, because I think that really can make it even extra fun for the kids and also for the parents.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing some of that. It's so really incredible. And that's why I like to give the opportunity. Most people pass it up, but I'm glad that you shared. So let's get to our final question. And then again, if anything else, listen, I'm very flexible, but the final question is a very easy one. You'll know the answer if you have one. So the final question is, Suzy, where are you going? What do you have already planned maybe this year, next year?
That's true. And I maybe gave a prelude to that in the opener, but we are going to spend the fall in Japan. My kids will do a program there, and we'll be there for 3 months. I'm really excited for the food. I've heard amazing things about the Japanese culture, of course, and the cleanliness and the quietness and also the hospitality. Also, the history is phenomenal. There's just been things happening on the island of Japan forever and ever. I'm very excited for that. And also, like, a little overwhelmed. I can get complacent when we're in Spain long enough and I've picked up enough of the language that it's okay. We're going to be somewhere where we really are going to not even be able to, like, remotely understand a sign or read a sign, and thankfully with modern technology, it makes it a little easier. But it's going to stretch us in ways. I'm sure we'll have some type 2 fun opportunities as well. But I'm hoping there's plenty of type 1 opportunities to have as well. And I'm just really excited for something totally new for all of us. But my kids they like rice and sushi, so they'll be good. And then also new for my husband, because he, growing up in Germany, he had lived in China, like he's traveled kind of differently. So there's not always stuff that's new to both of us, actually. So it's kind of cool that Japan will be.
Yeah, that's very exciting to get to be able to explore a place together for the first time. So, well, I'm excited for you, and hope maybe we'll talk again down the road, and maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's plenty of places we did not even touch on, and you're going to continue to travel, and so it'd be great to keep in touch. And I'm definitely going to be following along with your podcast as well. I hope our listeners do also. And thank you for taking all of this time. Is there any kind of like final words that you'd like to say before we hit stop?
Take the trip.
Yeah, that's it. Do it. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'm sorry you had to miss the first part, but you'll get to catch the highlights of the European singing competition thing that's going on.
No, I mean, it actually just started at 9:30 p.m. So don't worry, I've only missed 12 minutes, and it's probably going to go till 1 p.m. So don't worry.
Excellent.
I don't even watch the whole thing. I like just watching the songs. And so that'll be tomorrow. So yeah, tune into Eurovision, because that is a very Euro cultural phenomenon. I mean, there's always a little bit of controversy. It's always like who's not getting along or having opinions about it. And then the songs are funny / goofy / cheesy. And some countries sing in English because it's more this European and international thing. But then some are very proud of their language and their heritage, and that comes through in their songs. So it is so Euro. There's also like a movie Will Ferrell was in that is like kind of about Eurovision, that makes kind of fun of it. That's funny, but it's always been something I think about at the end of May, mid-May. It takes place all the way since back in 2010 when I first lived here. I remember watching it when we were somewhere, and I was like, what is this Eurovision? And so it's something that every year we watch the clips of, and it's really fun to be here and see it take place. So yeah, I highly check it out tomorrow. And so you can get all, like, just watch the songs from the countries that you want to see, or the winners or something.
Excellent. And if you're listening to this right away as it's airing, we recorded this about 8 hours ago from the time it actually posts. So
really?
You actually can just about real time. It should still be going on as this episode is airing. So cool. So if you have access to Eurovision, or go online and see if you can find it. But
yeah, late breaking news. We don't even know at this moment who's won, but maybe by the time this airs, they'll have a winner. And then the country that wins hosts the next year.
Oh, very cool.
And so that is kind of fun. You just never know where it's actually going to be next year.
That's pretty neat, actually.
Yeah,
I like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So awesome, Suzy. Thank you so much for taking this time. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate you. And good luck with everything.
Yes, thank you so much, Bill. This has been great. I appreciate you. Thank you.
And there's another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast in the books. Thank you so much for listening today. It was another great guest with some great stories, as always. And I hope that you will support all of the guests by checking out the show notes and going to their web pages, seeing any socials and projects that they may have going on. And please, again, I'll ask as always to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really does help to allow the podcast to grow and reach more people, and I appreciate you for doing that. Also, if you haven't done so, check out the website, whyvpodcast.com, where you can find blog posts. If you'd like to be a guest, please register to be a guest on the site, and check out the merch page. There's some really cool stuff if you're interested in representing the pod, along with some other cool travel items and apparel that I'm working on every day as well. Join me again next week for another great guest with more incredible stories. New episodes drop every Sunday just after midnight Eastern Time. Until then, thank you for being here, and have a great day.